and a water, Jenny.
Dr. Tony Huge, welcome to the show. I am Jay from Train by Jay. I've been doing a little bit of a podcast thing. I'm an online coach for mostly young men, 20, 30, 40 years old. Very interested in biohacking, so I'm sure my audience will appreciate this. Just to give a little bit of background, I've been following Tony since I was in high school, just trying to get big. Him and Coach Trevor doing the mass blast cycles, like trying to gain as much muscle in a week, pounding the cereal. I think there was another bodybuilder. His name might have been Ahmad or something like that. Um,
Akash.
Akash, my bad, Akash. But I
Yeah.
remember Coach Trevor was getting pissed because one of you guys overdid it with the diuretics or something or the Lasix.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys have been definitely a big part of my inspiration in coming up. And here we are 10 years later. Welcome to the show.
All right, Jay. Yeah, good to talk to you in person. We've chatted over the years, and now we're on video. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So Tony, if you don't mind, just give the audience a little bit about who you are, where you're coming from. I know you're coming from originally America, and then you moved to the bodybuilding paradise, Thailand. So how was that journey and that transition from being a lawyer to more of this online bodybuilding stuff been for you?
Well, my whole life I've been obsessed with biohacking since I was a young kid, but I didn't take on the powerful muscle building compounds like steroids and the heavy performance enhancing drugs until I turned age 30 when I had an epiphany. And I've had a series of epiphanies over my life that got me closer and closer to truly and deeply believing that a day natural is a day wasted and that we have the technology to become superhuman and it's ignorant not to use it. So, my life mission has become, especially because before I was anti chemistry, anti a lot of different types of chemistry. I was pro herbs, I was pro supplements, and I experimented with every supplement that was available. But I was anti drug, I was anti powerful chemistry. I felt like the human body was almost perfect how it was, and that we shouldn't override those systems too much. And now I believe that we should try, if we can, experiment and try to override all of these natural systems to see if we can do better than nature did. Of course, there's only a matter of time until we understand the human body and we have every molecule necessary to manipulate every human, pathway. And we're getting closer and closer to that every day. So my mission is to teach people to take more control over their own biochemistry, and with that comes more mindfulness, more abilities in the human experience, a better quality of life, the end of suffering, and so on. So I started taking steroids when I was 30. I'm 43 now. And I took my first trip to Thailand also when I was 30, and other Asian countries. And it just expanded my my mind so much. I felt when I went back to Sacramento, California, I felt like everything was very small and constrained, and I was a big fish in a small pond. So I just saw all these other choices with what I could do with my human experience. And I traveled the entire world. I found Thailand had the most amount of freedom for the also, but still having the most amount of resources. So there's other places in the world where there's more freedom, less government, but they don't have technology, they don't have infrastructure, they don't have fast Wi-Fi. You can't buy imported goods. So I found Thailand was that place back then. It's changing. Thailand's becoming more controlling, less freedom also, and the import and custom duty are a real pain here. But in general, it's a good place for bodybuilding because there's less stress. The environment's more positive. When you're a bodybuilder, you need to keep your cortisol low. You need to stay in the growth phase more, which means you need a more nurturing and plentiful environment with ready to access food, good gyms. Uh, Things have to not be so time consuming that you lose all your time that you could be doing, let's say, bodybuilding or anything else on administrative, life maintenance stuff. Like in America, we spend a huge amount of time just on life maintenance and administration stuff, going to DMV and waiting in line and
Yeah.
driving around.
Yeah.
So we got rid of all that wasted time and all of that, and that's why a lot of bodybuilders come here. A lot of MMA fighters come here too because they can really just focus on their training without the just the administrative burden of the rest of life because life is so much easier here. So it is, yeah, it's a bodybuilder's paradise. It's not as it's not as good as it used to be, and it's going to continue to get worse. But we have to be grateful because compared to most places in the world, this is still one of the places where you have the most amount of freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that freedom is one of your big virtues. You talk about that a lot, as well as the statement. I believe you're the one who kind of coined this. Every biological problem, there's a chemical solution. Do you think at this point, with current medical, scientific, biohacking strategies that are available right now, we can truly solve any biological problem with a chemical solution? Or are we yet to be there just yet?
Of course, we don't have a chemical solution for every biological problem exactly yet because some things like a fracture or something like that, you have to reset the bone. Some
Mhm.
things are with the body are mechanical, not chemical. But if if you think of, like, as a coach yourself, you think of what problems do people come to you with. 99% of the problems people come to you with are solvable with chemistry.
Yeah.
Uh,
So talk to me about that. I mean, on my end, I see hypertension, diabetes, elevated cholesterol levels, the metabolic syndrome, the cluster of five related issues going on. Are you seeing the same thing in Thailand as well?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, America has the food problem. People eat too much. There's more insulin insensitivity. But in America, you also have more people that are educated about. There's a big division between people who are educated about diet, nutrition, and health and care about their health and people that don't. And in other parts of the world, it's similar also. They still have there's still cancer, there's still blood pressure, there's still insulin sensitivity, but it's always the people who don't have any knowledge of diet and exercise and health, and um, they could prevent all of this by living a healthy lifestyle and doing Huberman style biohacking,
Hmm.
but not everybody wants to be a slave to these type of health protocols, and people just want to live their lives. So yeah, they end up a lot of people end up in the same situation. I'd say it's a lot less prevalent overseas. People are just generally healthier because of the food supply and because of more walking, more exercise, less driving.
Yeah,
But
you see that in a lot of
general health
Italian
problems everywhere.
in Italy and in European countries as well. And even things like gluten intolerance in America, it's not necessarily the gluten itself. People with gluten intolerance from America go to Europe or Italy or somewhere else. They have no issues with the gluten over there. It's the processing, it's everything that happens from the field to the table that really matters a lot. Now, tell me, with bodybuilding paradise, it's not just bodybuilders. I see a lot of entrepreneurs go to Thailand as well to kind of get that focus. The cost of living's low. There's a lot of freedom. You can do a lot of things. But a big issue here is big pharma, the monopolization of health insurance, and kind of almost being to the point where it's truly just monopolized. Like, people don't have full control of their health. Like, if they want to get something done, they have to pay an arm and a leg, or they have to rely on their health insurance and then get a script from a doctor who's going to just refer them to another specialist. What's the access to pharmaceuticals, gear, blood work look like in the Thailand?
We still do have the big pharma problem here, but it's coming from America. Like, if it wasn't for America, there wouldn't be a big pharma problem here. So access right now is still good. Medical costs are 80% cheaper in Thailand than America probably. So, like, I don't even have health insurance in Thailand. Why would I need health insurance? The cost of medical services is so low.
Mhm.
If I need something, I just go to the hospital and pay for it. Um, on the other hand, they are trying to monopolize it. They are learning from Americans and certain other places where they're trying, like the big mega hospitals are trying to monopolize it and take all of the power and away from the smaller hospitals and smaller clinics. That way, you just have one or two families that basically own the entire medical system in Thailand, the same way that it happens in America. So they're learning from America on how to, exploit people, control people, and
Ah, that's
you know,
that's unfortunate. Is it true
yeah,
though? I see a lot of TikTok influencers that go to Thailand and they're bragging about how they can just walk into a pharmacy and get some testosterone or pharmaceutical
yeah.
grade bar. Is it really that easy?
Yeah, that's true. Yep, for sure, because the government in these countries has not determined steroids to be harmful. So in America, and they're not harmful. If safely used, they're just like any other medication. It's bizarre why steroids would be illegal, and yet, alcohol is legal. Alcohol is far more dangerous. Not tobacco more dangerous, but cigarettes specifically much more dangerous than steroids. So why this hypocrisy of making things that are actually addictive and harmful illegal, legal and socially acceptable, and then demonizing steroids? It doesn't make any sense. And these countries are acting logically because they haven't taken that on as like a political movement, or they haven't tried to monopolize self-optimization the same way that America has.
Yeah, where do you think that comes from, that belief that steroids are inherently harmful? And they're trying to do the same thing, I believe, with SARMs, trying to make it a little more of a controlled substance. I know that there's some bills that they're trying to get passed and stuff. Maybe that'll happen someday. But where's this bad rap with androgens and androgen agonists kind of getting from in America?
Well, I think a lot of things, but there's a lot of factors, a lot of human emotional factors. Yeah, and it stems back to, yeah, money, power, and human emotions. So in America, it was Joe Biden actually who was one of the leaders of the political change to outlaw steroids. And back then, it's also a jealousy thing. Um, will give you an extreme example. In I think it was Sweden. I think it's Sweden. If not, it's a neighboring country. But they made steroids highly illegal there, and it happened very quickly. And I was told the story by someone who actually knew the politician that um, rallied to make it illegal, and his wife cheated on him with a bodybuilder. They literally went after steroids because the head politician, was angry at bodybuilders and wanted to take steroids away from bodybuilders. So in that situation, it was just a jealousy thing. I mean, you think it might be a part of well, it is in some countries part of a bigger conspiracy to limit human potential. But in America, I talked to another high up politician and I said, what's going on with the feminization of America? Why are they taking testosterone away from men? Why are we okay with pumping men and women with synthetic estrogens and feminizing all of America? And it's not feminizing like it doesn't make everybody gay. It's nothing to do with that.
Hmm.
It's that when a man's testosterone is low, he doesn't think for himself. He
Yeah.
doesn't
He becomes
he doesn't
kind
have
of like a
critical thinking.
blind cattle, just follow whatever and get taxed into infinity and just accept
Right.
all the bills that slowly just take away your freedoms. I get that.
Yeah.
That's probably why a lot of guys also
Right.
try to get out of America. I got you. And that actually reminds me the personal vendetta that person had. The his girlfriend cheated on with a bodybuilder thing. That's pretty much the same thing that happened with marijuana illegalization, in my understanding, right? There was like this guy who was trying to sell paper, and then he found out that hemp was going to take over his business. And then so he made this wild claim that marijuana makes white women, this is like hundreds of years ago when people were racist, it makes white women crave the African American men. Like that's a whole bad thing. And this is how they made marijuana illegal. And now we're just starting to realize, I mean, it's just a plant, at the end of the day. I guess if you use it with, moderation or properly, maybe not as harmful as previously thought. Okay. So let's
Yeah.
talk
And
about,
the
oh
one
yeah, go
but the
ahead.
one other element really quick is the sick care versus human optimization. The example is a man in America, they've got, six different health problems and they go to the doctor, they get six different medications, but the root cause of the problem is the testosterone deficiency. So if they were to give the man testosterone, they would solve six conditions and they wouldn't need six medications and they would be healthy and they would be independent. So it's a way of keeping people dependent and sick. And it's not just the medical industry, it's the supplement industry and every other industry that benefits from men having low testosterone. Nobody makes money off of when men have high testosterone, men take their own power back. They build their families, they build themselves. When men have low testosterone, they can't build themselves, they can't build their family properly, they lose their power and they give all of their power, like the Matrix almost, just giving their power to the
Yeah,
system.
it is. It is too well strategic for it to be just a coincidence. This is definitely, it seems like it's very intentional. And I mean, just to name a few conditions that testosterone therapy can absolutely ameliorate or perhaps even reverse as the root cause, we're talking about things like sarcopenia, right? Health span optimization, Alzheimer's disease, depression, anxiety. I mean, you wouldn't be depressed if you had high levels of testosterone and you were being the man that you were supposed to be, supporting for your family, getting shit done. But here we are, trying to throw band-aid fixes one at a time, never giving them the real cure because then they wouldn't make any money off that system, right? Gotcha,
Right.
gotcha. Let's talk about, I know you're a big proponent of SARMs, and honestly, you probably were a big influential component with your experiments with SARMs, your data on SARMs. Of course, a lot of it is anecdotal. Unfortunately, it takes a long time to get it through the clinical trials. But talk to me about kind of the difference between SARMs and steroids, at least for the layman's terms for the audience here.
Steroids come from testosterone, and as time went on and technology developed, testosterone kept getting modified into other molecules that would have more benefits with less side effects, and then we're ending with things like Primabol and Anavar, which are steroids that have very little side effects, and they're still based on the same structure of the testosterone molecule, basically. And then when SARMs, the difference with SARMs is like you stop using the testosterone backbone or DHT backbone and just throw out that approach completely to activating the receptor inside the cell. And instead, they said they reverse engineered it. They said, what could fit inside this receptor that we could synthetically make that would not fit so well in prostate tissue, would not be androgenic in prostate tissue, because mainly they're developed to have all the benefits of testosterone in muscle, but without the side effects in prostate tissue. Or at least that's how they would measure it, because then that would translate to, hair loss and,
Yeah, yeah, that relates
virilization in women.
to the Hirschberger assay, right? The levator anti-growth versus the ventral prostate growth in rats, which
Yeah,
somewhat does correlate, and it does look like, I mean, I believe the Brad 140 has a anabolic to androgenic ratio of 90 to 1. No steroid
right.
is even coming close to that. Nandrolone is maybe a 9 to 1. Not that the anabolic androgenic steroid ratio is like everything, but it just goes to show how big of a drastic going from a steroidal to a non-steroidal polar molecule, which of course would improve its bioavailability. And you don't need to 17 alkylate it, so the liver toxicity is going to be a lot less. It's in and out of your system. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier theoretically as much, so the downregulation of testosterone might be a little bit less. And we do see that anecdotally as well in Reddit. Like people come back from SARM cycles very, very fast, at least in relation to steroids, which have that rigid steroidal plane, which kind of limits it in of itself. Now, the big question that we're always trying to answer, that we're kind of getting a little bit closer every single year, is, as you said, isolating the beneficial anabolic effects on muscle tissue with all the unwanted androgenic issues like the hair loss, the acne, the blood pressure issues, right? Now, another class that's kind of been a little bit more on the newer end here is myostatin inhibitors. Okay. Do you think, in your honest opinion and your experience so far, really hammering down on the androgen receptor vector, so getting the perfect SARM, is going to be the fastest way to get there? Or should we start looking elsewhere into other vectors of muscle growth beyond just the androgen receptor? If you want to tap in about the anabolic matrix, feel free to do so as well.
Yeah, the anabolic matrix was Coach Trevor and I invented because we saw too many bodybuilders hammering the androgen receptor, taking more and more steroids and ignoring all these other growth pathways. And so we wanted to put them all on a level playing field. Yeah, it starts with the androgen receptor, testosterone, steroids, SARMs on the far left side. But then all of these other different pathways, if you're not paying attention to them, they become limiting factors. And why would you hammer one pathway and just give no attention to these other pathways? The myostatin pathway, if you look at the animal models, it appears to have the most potential because you lower the myostatin of a cow or a mouse and it doubles its muscle mass, or some crazy off the charts looks like a mutant. But it doesn't seem to work the same way in humans. The myostatin pathway itself is not as much of a regulator of muscle mass in humans as it is in animals. So it's definitely an important pathway. And the benefit is it doesn't have any of the side effects of the other pathways. Like with testosterone, you could have the side effect of suppressing your own testosterone levels, and you can have it affecting other tissues because many different organs in the body use testosterone besides just muscle. And the insulin pathway obviously has a lot more to do with other parts of the body than just muscle. But myostatin seems to be mostly in the muscle tissue, mostly affecting the muscle tissue, not even the heart tissue. And because people are worried, like if they lower myostatin, then all the muscles grow, then so will the heart grow. But we don't see that happening that much either. So it is kind of targeted. It's a kind of targeted mechanism in mostly muscle tissue.
Yeah.
But we have people doing myostatin inhibition gene therapy, and we would expect to see them look like mutants with big, huge muscles, but they don't. Maybe are gaining a little bit of muscle, and it's making a difference. And it's something probably all humans eventually will probably sign up for, monthly injections of myostatin inhibitors or, some gene therapy, and that's beneficial. And maybe it gets most humans to where they want to be, but it's not enough in a human to use a myostatin inhibition pathway to become like a bodybuilder. It's not as powerful enough of a mechanism, but it's definitely powerful. It's definitely experimented a lot with it. And it's definitely a limiting factor when we're building muscle through other pathways. Like we are taking steroids, we're building muscle. And actually steroids lower myostatin too. A lot of things lower myostatin, but the problem is there's so many checks and balances that are preventing the body from growing past a certain point in muscle because it's not advantageous to survival. So the more muscle you have, the more resistant your body becomes to growing more muscle. And the number one way we can remove that rate limiting step is by lowering myostatin. So it's interesting because a lot of the bodybuilders actually think, I don't need to deal with myostatin because they're already hammering the steroids. And a lot of the novices, amateurs, they're more interested in myostatin because then they don't have to become bodybuilders to have muscle. But the truth is, I think who should be doing it the most is the bodybuilders. I think they would benefit from it the most. So I think it's a healthier approach rather than take more steroids, just lower myostatin and grow more muscle for less side effects.
Yeah, yeah, and that is, of course, my understanding on the anabolic matrix. You could hammer the androgen receptor, but you're only going to get so far, and the rate of diminishing returns really starts to creep on you after a certain level of doses, right? Why not leverage the other pathways that aren't associated with hypertension or cholesterol issues? Now, Tony, I've been doing a lot of research on myostatin, mitochondrial kind of peptides. This will kind of lead into the peptide discussion that we'll have in a second. But if it's all right with you, can I just run by with you what my understanding of this so far? I kind of put bits and pieces together to formulate a conclusion on why we have myostatin and why that relates to these new mitochondrial peptides are. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. So myostatin is a myokin. It is a chemical that is secreted by muscle tissue, and it is highly conserved in evolution. What that means is almost all species with skeletal muscles tend to have myostatin. It's there for a reason. And by extension, if we didn't have it, it probably means that the animals that accidentally mutated and had no myostatin knockout for whatever reason, it was not good to their survival. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If we're talking about caveman days, food, resources, limited, always on your feet, burning through calories, well, muscle is a very metabolically active tissue. If you have tons of muscle, unregulated, everything that you're eating is just getting stored as muscle tissue, well, that's going to be pretty detrimental to your relative VO2 max, perhaps, right? Because myostatin is also related to more type 2 fibers, the glycolytic, as opposed to the type 1, in addition to massive amounts of energy demands. Well, the mitochondria is what secretes or makes the usable form of energy in our body, the ATP. And essentially, the way that I've kind of put these bits and pieces together and kind of put this in relation to the new peptides such as MOTS-c, SS31, these different mitochondrial related peptides, is, well, your body has a myostatin to inhibit you from putting on too much muscle. Why? Perhaps because that muscle would require a higher level of energy demand. If you're not healthy overall, and that means by extension, inflammation, oxidative stress, it's damaging your mitochondria, well, now you have a reduced capacity to generate usable ATP. Of course, your body is going to pump out more myostatin to prevent you from overgrowing beyond that. So my, kind of thesis or conclusion on this is before you really blast the growth phase, get your mitochondrial health really good, perhaps with leveraging peptides such as MOTS-c, SS31, different fasting or cardio protocols as a baseline. And then once we have that, we have a really good stem cell population, the satellite cells that are right near the muscles. They're highly correlated to your aerobic performance and your mitochondrial health as well. You've established that pool that's ready to now proliferate and differentiate. You get that done first. Then we go into a growth phase. We slam the anabolics. We slam the SARMs. We slam the growth hormone, the insulin, the other classic bodybuilding. You're going to grow like a weed because now you have the stem cells, the satellite cells ready to actually turn into that and a greater energy capacity where you can handle that excess amount of muscle mass. Now, am I just throwing shit at the wall here, or does this kind of actually make sense? Like, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that sounds right. Because also when through evolution, I mean, maybe there was maybe aliens, mated with monkeys and made humans, but there was evolution of to the point of getting to a monkey first, right? So the evolution starts with the mitochondria because without energy you can't build anything. So you have to have energy first. So that makes sense that energy would be the foundation that you would want to fix that rate limiting step before
Hmm.
moving on to other pathways. And yeah, that would make sense for anti-aging, fat loss, muscle building. I never thought of it like solving the energy problem first. I kind of think of all, but yeah, if you're doing step by step, that would make sense. Solve cellular energy first, and then you have more energy to do pretty much everything else with your body, and you're going to not be up as against as much resistance because yeah, one of the main things our body's doing for survival is budgeting energy. So if you increase the energy and your body doesn't have to budget so much between different things, healing and repair and muscle building and all these different energy demands, if you just increase the energy supply and increase the function of the energy process, then you have more energy to do everything else. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, metabolism is the addition, the sum of all the metabolic reactions that happen in your body, the anabolic and the catabolic. Muscle growth is an anabolic process. What does that mean? You're building bonds. That's where you have to put energy to make bonds. Catabolism is where you get energy, such as the breakdown of ATP into ADP and phosphate, such as the breakdown of glycolysis or protein or beta oxidation. You're breaking things apart in catabolism, breaking the bonds. That's where the energy is stored. If you want to grow, you need the energy. Your body needs to have the capacity to generate that energy to put that into the bonds for the muscle links, the anabolic effect. Absolutely makes a lot of sense there. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on the myostatin's effect on tendons, though? I know a lot of people, especially with YK11, they're like, I get the joint pain. Do you get that at all?
Yeah, I do get the joint pains. Is it from the actual lowering of myostatin? I'm not certain. I know that in the animal models, these animals that built huge amounts of muscle from lowering myostatin did not increase their joint tendon ligament strength.
Mhm.
And so it could create a little bit of a risk of the muscle is too strong for the connective tissue, which is something we see. We see that with SARMs and steroids also, but also because I don't know if the joints and tendons are just becoming weaker or if they're becoming weaker in relation to the increased muscle mass that's
Yeah.
being increased,
Well,
because
Tony.
normally when you work out, your joints and tendons are going to have to adapt with the muscle growth at the same
Mhm.
time. But if the muscle growth comes much faster and it wasn't from the stimulation that included the joints, tendons, and ligaments, then we're going to have a discrepancy. We're going to have a weak link in this connective tissue.
Yeah, so myostatin can be thought of as a regulator, not just of muscle growth, but also as a governor to maintain the tendon to muscle contractile force ability. As strong as a muscle is, if the tendon is not up to par, well, you're just setting yourself up for injury. A few years ago, I was researching the mechanisms of muscle growth, and of course, I did a lot of research on myostatin. What's actually quite interesting, a finding is this, and this is not very well known, and perhaps would give you a little bit of insight on perhaps why things like YK11 cause that joint tendon, that brittle kind of feeling like it's about to snap off the bone, right? If you're getting real YK11, I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's just Winstrol in a bottle. But anyways, we have stem cells, right? Stem cells are pluripotent, meaning that they are capable of differentiating into nearly any kind of cell given the right stimulus. Well, what is the main stimuluses that we have? We have things like IGF-1, we have VEGF, these growth factors. Well, in the Journal of Hand Surgery several years ago, this is hand surgery, right? So hands, there's not much muscle here. There's a lot of tendon though, right? And I've seen this in my anatomy class. If you open up the hand in a cadaver, it's mostly just tendons. They found that myostatin applied to injured tendons actually promote stem cell differentiation and commitment towards the tenocytic lineage, meaning that it tells stem cells to commit and differentiate into fully functional adult tendon cells, right? So to maintain the tendon barrier. So, and perhaps in this case, not only is myostatin important for making sure that we don't get so big that we just die, but also at the local aspect from muscle to muscle, it's making sure the muscle as it grows, it's making more myostatin. We know this. As we get bigger, our body produces more myostatin, but that's not just to promote to prevent muscle growth. The myostatin is allowing those stem cells that otherwise would have went to contractile muscle tissue to now go more towards the tenocytic lineage of that muscle to maintain the tendon and the muscle are in tandem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when we have these animals like rats and mice and cows that we're experimenting with myostatin inhibition on, they're just standing all day or they're running. They're not lifting, doing resistance training or anything like that. And so in humans, now we have the humans using these gene therapy myostatin inhibition, like Brian Johnson, for example, and a lot of other people that went to the clinic in Dubai or El Salvador, I think it is. And I'm really curious because they're supposedly using the most powerful myostatin inhibition, which I don't think is necessary. I think YK11 is adequate, but they're using all these advanced gene therapies. Are we going to see more tendon injuries? That's what I'm waiting for to see real world application. Yeah, your scientific analysis of it makes total sense as far as how I understand biology to work and kind of the checks and balances and switches that work through it. So that makes total sense. And now we got to see the real world application. Is this really going to happen? Is Brian Johnson going to tear a muscle or a tendon?
Hopefully
Then
not.
we'll know.
Hopefully not. But
Yeah,
then, of course, if he does, I know that he'll probably use some sort of Wolverine stack like BPC 157 and
yeah.
TT 500. We'll get to that here in just one second. But one more thing on myostatin is we have YK11, which I think is the most practical, most accessible one in America so far. We also have it starts with an A, it's ACE something. I think it's a peptide that does that. We have follistatin, which unfortunately, I mean, it's in the name, it suppresses follistatin stimulating hormone, right? It's follistatin. But in one of the studies that I read, the actual receptor for myostatin involves a whole cascade of activin receptors, right? So what they're doing to try to inhibit myostatin in some cases, we got mononucleal antibodies, right? So monoclonal antibodies. So the antibodies would like attack the myostatin and get rid of it. We can also inject people with a decoy myostatin receptor, the soluble activin receptor. So the myostatin binds to that, very similar to kind of how proviron and SHBG, you're gonna distract the SHBG with the proviron so that the other steroids work better. Same concept here, right? But a big interesting side effect that happened in some of those individuals was they started to get bleeding in the gums. What is another condition where that is common? Scurvy, vitamin C deficiency. Vitamin C is important for collagen synthesis, connective tissue. Again, suggesting that myostatin may have a role in not just limiting contractile muscle tissue, but also promoting the stability and the integrity of connective tissue in the gums, in the tendons as well.
Yeah, so let's say for you, if this question for you, if you could lower myostatin to whatever percentage you want, you've got a dial on your watch and you can dial it down to zero myostatin. And let's say that if you take, certain chemistry, just healthy chemistry you're taking already, it's lowering by 10%. Certain steroids and a lot of other things, even creatine could lower myostatin a small amount, I think. So you're already dialed down 10%. Now, where would you put that dial, knowing now that myostatin has some of these health benefits? And if you trained it to zero, you would have maybe bigger muscles, but you could have all these other side effects of low myostatin. Where do you set your dial?
That's a great question, by the way. I would take it as a very cautious and slow, gradual approach. I would definitely not go from 100 down to zero, as tempting as that would be. And that would pretty much mean I could eat whatever I want, not even train and just grow while sitting on the couch. Everybody wants to do that, but there is no quite magic pill with no side effects just yet. So I would perhaps lower it by, maybe 10%. Maybe once a week, I would lower it by another 10% going forwards. And of course, knowing what I know now about myostatin's role in tendon integrity, I would probably change up my training to be perhaps lighter weight with a much slower eccentric, because as a physical therapist, the most common way that you rupture a tendon, injure a tendon, is a uncontrolled, fast eccentric motion when you are kind of giving out. You've seen the videos of the quad tears, the bicep tears, right? So in that sense, I would leverage more of the metabolic stress pathway instead of just mechanical tension or progressive overload to drive anabolism, perhaps even include things like arachidonic acid or the BFR bands to really, really drive in the metabolic stress aspect. But I would take on a very, very cautious approach in doing so. And even if myostatin inhibition doesn't directly cause the heart to grow, perhaps the heart might not be as sensitive to myostatin inhibition as skeletal muscle. Well, if I just grow a whole bunch, whether it's water weight, fat, muscle tissue, that's a lot more load on my heart to handle. For that reason as well, I would take it very, very slow, only dialing it up as needed.
Yeah. One thing I noticed also with myostatin is all these treatments seem to take time to work. So they get the gene therapy to lower their myostatin, but the results come over months or potentially years. It's not like a steroid or a SARM or growth hormone, even where the muscle kind of blows up fairly quickly. So unfortunately, that means also if we have any of these side effects that are happening from low myostatin, those are also happening gradually over time, and it's kind of like a frog in the hot water that then boils, and the frog doesn't really know it's happening until it's too late.
Mhm.
And that may be what's going to happen with these myostatin side effects that we're going to see. But gosh, yeah, we've got these guys doing the gene therapy, which is the most powerful myostatin inhibition that you could ask for. They're turning the dial down to probably somewhere near zero, and we're going to observe what side effects. But are they going to be honest about the side effects?
Yeah, you can't always trust what you see on Instagram or social media. People are only posting the best parts. There's a reason why you don't really see bodybuilders that didn't make it, unfortunately, after doing everything that they did. to their health. You don't really see that. So it's kind of survivorship bias in that sense. So I like this discussion. I like where this is headed. So I think the next question to ask is, Tony, obviously you've been researching a lot. You've learned a lot more since that 1 week mass blast phase you did with Akash several years ago. I'm just curious, okay, if finances were not an issue, if you had all the technology in the world, gene editing, liposomal technology, anything you want that's out there, you have access to it. If you hypothetically had someone in front of you, a young, healthy 25-year-old man, already a bodybuilder, that in 1 week wanted to put on as much muscle as humanly possible with perfect adherence, what would that protocol actually look like?
It would still be the mass blast basic principles, which is to blast every pathway all at once.
Hmm.
It was basic. The mass blast is basically like if you took a top pro bodybuilder cycle and then combined it with a top level biohackers protocol and chemist, and then you see how fast the human body can grow muscle. But the limitation is food. I would tell mass blast subjects that they try to eat 10,000 calories per day. And, normally if someone's calorie maintenance is 3,000 calories and you add 500 calories for bulking or even 300 calories or something, then you could multiply that by the amount of time and see how much muscle it's all calculatable basically. But the idea was if we're just removing all of the rate limiting steps, then how much muscle could we build as fast as possible? And it's still basically the same protocol. The steroids are a more high side effect, but very powerful way to activate the androgen receptor. And we just add in SARMs to replace some of the steroids so that we have less side effects. And it's the same thing on every pathway. So on an insulin pathway, we're still going to use insulin, but we're also going to use things to increase insulin sensitivity. And then on the myostatin pathway, we already had YK11, which worked really well for lowering myostatin. And then also the point of the mass blast was to build muscle so fast that myostatin couldn't increase in time. So even if we had no myostatin inhibitor, we're still removing the rate limiting step of the myostatin pathway because the schedule of the mass blast being so short doesn't allow the human body to put on the brakes to muscle growth. And that's one of the things that's what in my early experiments that prove this hypothesis, that's one of the things I noticed, that if you went especially from fat loss phase to a muscle building phase, the body would actually rebound like a pendulum. And you'd have this period of time where there was no limit to how much muscle you could grow, but then that would end. And so I didn't understand why bodybuilder protocols were 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks long, because they're experiencing so much more resistance further down the line as myostatin starts limiting, not just myostatin, but there's other biological checks and balances that maybe we aren't even aware of, other limiting factors and other pathways that we may not even be aware of yet that are preventing our body from growing too much muscle, which would then compromise our survival. So the protocol for the mass blast, if I do it today, it still looks very similar. It was so far ahead of its time. Like now we have the myostatin, more knowledge and more chemistry for the myostatin pathway, but the mass blast protocol already took myostatin into consideration. It already had an approach for myostatin. So myostatin is more like a long-term, like someone wants to build a little bit more muscle over the next 6 months, I think usually. It's in that case, it wasn't that we eliminated myostatin for that 1 week. It's that myostatin was at its normal level, but it didn't have the opportunity to increase to resist the increased muscle mass. So yeah, it's still the same protocol, and we can still put on as much muscle as someone can eat in food. And 10,000 calories per day, you can multiply that the excess calories and see how much muscle that could build. I mean, some amount of calories that we eat in excess is going to cause our metabolism to speed up, and some just going to get burned off as body heat. But a lot of that's actually going to go towards muscle building. So yeah, we can still build huge amounts of muscles in short period of time, but it doesn't really solidify. Like you can you can create more satellite cells, you can recruit more satellite cells, you can hypertrophy the muscle cells up, but it's not really going to stick. It's just like anything else, it's almost a spiritual thing. It's like if you want to become something new and create a new life, and you become that, for you'll notice huge differences. You just instantly become the new person you want to become. It's a choice. But then if that new person you want to become is, has a lot of money and has this certain car and this certain girlfriend, like those manifestations take time. You have to become that thing, and then you have to let it solidify. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with muscle mass. We blow up the muscle, but
Mhm.
then if you just immediately stop, then that muscle is going to deflate again because it hasn't become permanent yet.
Yeah, yeah. The faster you do anything, it just doesn't stick as long, right? And that's the power of habits and making it a lifestyle, especially with muscle mass. And I think that's also kind of where the concept of muscle maturity comes in, right? Because we got the younger bodybuilders that could take a lot more gear, and in some coaches, like Vigorous Steve, I believe, will argue that trenbolone is better reserved for the younger ones. They can handle the negative side effects of that. And they also kind of need to use it to get that look that Trenbolone gives you. But after you've been doing it for 2 decades of your life, you're a mature bodybuilder, 40, 45 years old, you already have that muscle maturity look to that. Now, one thing that I've kind of noticed here, and a lot of bodybuilders and bodybuilder coaches will probably agree to this as well, is growth hormone seems to give you a different look to the muscle that no other compound can really give you. Not just a muscle maturity aspect, but a density. And I believe beyond just the anabolic matrix and the mass blast phase, you and Coach Trevor at one point were chasing hyperplasia. Is that correct? Can you talk to us
Right.
about hyperplasia? What does that exactly mean? Is that even possible for adults? If so, how would we do that?
Yeah, I didn't think too. Okay, about the growth hormone changing the look of the muscle. Yeah, so there's muscle hyperplasia, right? But
Mhm.
also growth hormone burns fat, a lot of fat as well, and there's fat inside the muscle. So, when I'm trying to get someone ready for a competition before, growth hormone was a way that I could start working on fat loss really early in the protocol, so that it comes competition time, we've already gotten rid of a lot of that fat and we can focus on just like the stubborn body fat. So we've gotten rid of the fat everywhere else in the body. So growth hormone for the fat loss side, which then affects how the muscle looks. And then growth hormone for weak body parts, because we're talking muscle hyperplasia. There's certain places in the body where you're kind of stuck with the muscle fibers there, and they're stubborn and they won't hypertrophy, and you just got to build more muscle cells. And things like the calves are an example of that. I mean, I just, as a anecdote myself, I had really small calves, tiny calves, and I tried everything to grow them. Nothing would grow them. And then I got on steroids, and I thought, steroids will grow my calves. I took steroids and I smashed my calves. They grew a little bit, but then they hit a wall again. And then when I took growth hormone, my calves got bigger. When I took IGF, my calves actually became normal size.
Were you taking
They
the
told me it
IGF
mutated.
locally?
No, IGF-LR3.
Oh, okay. Now, what do you think is really responsible for that extra addition of calf growth by leveraging that somatic GH-IGF-1 pathway? Why did that work so much better, do you think, than just the androgens itself?
I think certain muscle tissue is really receptive to androgens, like the shoulders, for example. You see bodybuilders have these huge mutant-sized shoulders, and the shoulders grow pretty fast on steroids. Steroids plus, it seems to be high reps and a lot of intensity and a lot of frequency, and shoulders blow up, but calves don't. And that's because it's like we already have a tool for shoulders, and for, back, for example, grows a lot from steroids. But then the certain muscles are just not as responsive to the androgens. But I think it's not that the calves are more responsive to growth hormone and IGF. It's just that every muscle in the body seems to be responsive to growth hormone and IGF, whereas some muscles are not so responsive to the steroids.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe for the calves, not the shoulders. The rate limiting step for muscle growth was the growth hormone vector as opposed to
Mm.
the androgen receptor, which is a lot more dense in the traps, the shoulders and the upper chest area, as most of our viewers will be familiar with. Um, let's talk about real quick here the new age of peptides. MOTS-c, retatrutide, SLUPP, 332. I mean, some of these are not even really peptides, but they're in that class. What are some new compounds that you found massive success with for you or your clients?
Yeah, you mentioned some right there. I think the most significant one, the game changers, the retatrutide, because compliance is such a difficult component, but the retatrutide's a once a week injection. So they seem to, it's so easy. You just like, I mean, some of the girls, I experiment a lot on my harem of 7 girlfriends. They're like lab rats. And, even getting them to take a SARM every day or, their other supplements, it's difficult. But the once a week injection scheduled, it's like, boom, now they and they also don't have a lot of discipline. Most people don't have a lot of most people don't want to be bodybuilders eating 6 meals of chicken and rice per day. They
Mhm.
kind of want to go with the flow and how they feel. And it only takes with dieting, it only takes one mistake to set you way back. Eat one whole pizza, binge eating, and the amount of fat that someone gains from that, it's like it takes a week to get rid of that, right? So the retatrutide prevents these mistakes of overeating. And then most people are controlled by their emotions and have not a lot of discipline, but the retatrutide makes them not want to eat.
Mhm.
So, and then it's got the other health benefits. It's not just an appetite suppressant. There's other benefits of it as well. But the drawback of it is the girls, if they don't eat enough protein, then they don't build muscle. So they still, we have to add protein back into their diet. It'll cause them to eat less fat. It'll cause them to eat less carbs, cause them to eat less protein. But now we have to add the protein and add the supplements back in so they don't become deficient in nutrients because they're not eating enough.
Yeah, a big problem with the GLP-1s, not just in bodybuilders, but for the clinical use in those that are obese or type 2 diabetic, is they're not changing anything with their what they're eating. It's just how much they're eating is less. And they're also not training. They were not training to begin with. So we see a massive reduction in muscle mass, unfortunately. Now, that's a little bit ameliorated with the newer class of GLP-1s. So we had Ozempic, which is a single agonist. We have tirzepatide, which is a dual agonist. And then finally, we now have retatrutide, which is a triple agonist, with some people even reporting some anabolic effects, perhaps even being used in bulking phases. Where do you see retatrutide really shining? What's the main indication for you to actually start using that?
I'm not going to use it because I have an appetite problem. So even if it's mildly anabolic or anti-catabolic, uh, I'm definitely not going to build muscle on it. I'm definitely not going to go. I'm definitely still going to go catabolic on it because I really don't like my appetite when I was younger was so high,
Hmm.
and appetite was a at some when my metabolism slowed down when I turned 30, there was like an instant when my body started gaining fat and never did before, and my metabolism slowed down. I could also build muscle faster though when I turned 30. But now my appetite's very low, and I got to force myself to eat unless I'm eating addicting foods. Of course, if I'm eating ice cream and cookies, I can eat a lot. But to eat like healthy
Yeah.
food, my body says like, okay, you ate enough. That's good. You don't. My body's not. My body doesn't want to build muscle. I have to force it to build muscle. So I have to force feed myself those extra calories that would build more muscle. And so the appetite suppressing of a retatrutide or a GLP-1 is not something that I find helpful. But I do know a lot of other bodybuilders and coaches and friends that are bulking with retatrutide. And for them, because they're very disciplined with their meals, they're going to eat their chicken and rice 6 times a day, no matter what. Um, and they then use it to prevent them from eating anything else other than what they are intentionally eating. It gets rid of the cravings, it gets rid of the hunger, and they seem to be able to build muscle on it. Like it does seem to be able to help some of these guys gain muscle, even though they're on an appetite suppressant. because they're still disciplined with their meals. But that's not me. So and especially like I worry about of coaching clients and yeah, and anybody that I'm helping with it. I worry that that they're still driven a lot by their emotion. They're still gonna not be as compliant with a diet, and so if they need to bulk, I'm still using MK677 to increase their appetite, so that they eat more, so they build more muscle. And I'm staying away from the GLP-1. So I'm really using the GLP-1 for fat loss, not for muscle building, like but a lot of bodybuilders and coaches are using it also for muscle building.
Yeah. Well, besides retatrutide, we also have things like cardarine, MOTS-c, SLUPP 332, 5-amino-1-MQ, SS31, and other GHRP kind of peptides as well. Do you feel like these are best to be thought of as ranked, as this is the best one, this is the second best one, this is the best one, or more so, this is the best one if you want to do this, or this is the best one if you have this problem? Can you give us a little bit of insight on how you feel about these compounds and when they would also be indicated?
Yeah, if you took a matrix, not just anabolic matrix, but you just made a matrix of different pathways for anti-aging or for fat loss or muscle building, each individual is going to have rate limiting steps that if they eliminate that, that's going to give them the most results. So a while ago, I wrote the Tony Huge Laws of Biochemistry Physics, and one element of it is the prioritization of pathways and
Hmm.
where you could put the least amount of energy to have the greatest amount of effect. And so for someone who's like 50 years old, the NAD pathway, which would be 5-amino-1-MQ, may have the most significant results for them. And if someone has an insulin insensitivity problem, then something on the insulin sensitivity pathway is going to have the greatest results. So it's hard to just rank them overall for every human because every human has a different weak spot that they need to focus on. Like someone who's got low testosterone, they fix that, that's going to make the biggest difference for them. But if you had to rank them, I'd probably rank them by which one gives generally the most amount of benefit for the least amount of cost and hassle. Because, for example, you take like a cerebral lysin, just an example. What a hassle! What a protocol to have to
You have to
inject
inject
five
so
millimeters
much every single day.
twice. Yeah, so for me, that's just not even feasible. Like, why? There's so many other things that are powerful that are less hassle than that. So it's the same thing. It's like I would calculate because humans aren't robots. Humans still make decisions emotionally, and if a protocol is too complicated and too expensive, then people aren't going to do it. So 5-amino-1-MQ, for example, is expensive. It's very expensive, but it's also very powerful. So, but maybe for someone's budget, I would might skip that because it's expensive. Even though it's very powerful, maybe I'd use something that was not near as powerful, but much less expensive to fit into their protocol. On the other hand, 5-amino-1-MQ is the easiest protocol. You could just take 100 milligrams in the morning, for example. So ease of use is another factor. So yeah, I don't remember all the different chemistry you mentioned, but if I had to rank them, by just I don't know what the person's limiting factors are, and where we could put the least amount of energy for the most result. If I don't have that data, then I'm looking at ease of use, like, and then therefore compliance, like that they're going to actually use it every day because it doesn't do any good if they buy it and then don't use it. It just sits on the shelf. And then like what's actually powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's why Ratatouille shines so much. It's a once a week injection, and it kind of solves the root
Yeah.
cause of why they're fat to begin with. They're eating like a pig. So
Right.
yeah, good stuff. Okay, real quick, let's go over, let's say that you had an injury, okay? We know the basics. BPC 157, TB 500, maybe GHK copper for the collagen and stem cell recruitment stuff. Anything else other than that that you feel like would be a good addition for a acute musculoskeletal injury? A lot of my guys get this.
Collagen itself, but I think collagen itself isn't as powerful as these healing peptides, but it's some good raw material. And there is some signaling component to collagen peptides that are in collagen. So, and it's cheap. So, collagen and vitamin C, as you said before, is necessary for your body to be able to use collagen. So, like GHK copper plus collagen plus vitamin C, and now you're doing most of what you could do for a low cost on the collagen pathway. Um, Topicals. So if the injury is close enough to where you can use a topical to get into it to reduce the local inflammation or bring blood flow, even if it's like icy hot or even if it's hot cold therapy. Um, and DMSO can potentially help with all that and nutrient delivery. And then antioxidants like C60 is a very powerful antioxidant, and it's a very small molecule, so it can penetrate into all areas of the body. And areas that have inflammation, that have reduced blood flow, you still want to reduce the oxidation in that area, because oxidation is being created anytime there's processes happening. So if we
Yeah.
are accelerating the recovery process, increasing the blood flow, reducing the oxidation in the area, stem cells, but stem cells would be like the most expensive way to approach all of this.
Yeah,
Um,
that's probably the price of a car. But what you kind of said there is very much in line with your thought process behind the anabolic matrix. We're not just hammering one thing, we're giving it the building blocks with the vitamin C and the collagen. We're giving it the right signals with the BPC 157, the TB 500, the JHK copper. And then finally, we're removing any unnecessary distractions, in this case, with the topical super strong antioxidant, but also in the anabolic matrix, we're removing the myostatin pathway, the main limiter of muscle growth, at least the one that we recognize right now. So I like the way you think, Ashley, Tony. I think that's why I've been following you for so long, since high school. All right, so final question here is, what are you working on for research these days? I know that there was something about your harem of women that you kind of wanted to discuss and share here. Can you enlighten us here?
yeah, so norm back before, if you asked me what I'm working on, I would say mass blast, build as much muscle as a short a period of time as possible, or rapid fat loss, try to lose as much fat in a short time as possible. And through these, they're experiments so that I can learn all the different pathways. I can learn what the real rate limiting steps are as you redline each pathway, if there's any missing rate limiting steps. But all of this goes towards basically the overall theme of taking the human body off of automatic and putting it into manual, where we are manually in control of every pathway and every function of the body. Now that's too complicated, to go all the way with it, because there's, millions of processes and trillions of cells in our body. We don't have time and we don't have the science to manually control everything in the body, but to try to get closer to that. So my experiments are always pretty far ahead, because I'm trying to take things off automatic and put them onto manual long before anybody really sees the need or understands why we would ever do that. So with the girlfriends, for example, they're in automatic mode, but they're in automatic that's been programmed by a synthetic environment that doesn't have their best interest. Like even the media, for example, even though that's some external force and it's just stimulating us through through visual and auditory, it's actually affecting our body chemistry. It's hijacking our dopamine levels and then creates a cascade of change in the body that is maybe not optimal. So when I get these young girlfriends, 18 to 22 years old, and they are failing in every biological metric, basically, they're not healthy, their insulin sensitivity is messed up, their metabolic processes are already degrading, even though they're young. I mean, young people generally, they haven't had enough time to damage themselves. They're going to be more, but I can see the progression that if they continue with this life, then by the time they're 30, they're going to have, heart disease, some elements of heart disease, cancer, insulin sensitivity, all the basic human diseases. So I say, why not just shift them onto manual mode now, and then I control their body's chemistry and I rewire it. So it's like I'm in a shop tinkering with a car or a computer and experimenting with every different pathway. And through that, I'm learning, and every day is a new experiment. There's a lot of brain biohacking that I'm doing. So I think because the dopamine topic is so trending, because that's like a root cause. Like you probably have to fix the dopamine problem first, because if someone's not motivated or they're drawn to, it's like keeping someone on track. And then once they're on track and you can control the direction, then you can go the right direction. You can do a lot of things. So it's kind of the first thing to fix is their dopamine system. So yeah, a lot of dopamine biohacking, and yeah, fat loss, still muscle building, basically every pathway in the human body that, but in order of in order of priority, like I said, dopamine being very important, building muscle, losing fat being important, mainly because then they can see the results, and then they develop an ego about getting better, they develop an ego about personal development, and then that makes all of the other biohacking that comes later, which is more significant to me, like the mental and spiritual biohacking. But we start with the more physical, almost like a Maslow's, no, well, yeah, it'd be like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs also, like the physical and then going up to the mental. But it's also like the Hawkins scale of consciousness, where at the lower level we're dealing with very like immediate fight or flight, physical. We're not. It's not really a mental game yet. And then as we move up the scale, it becomes more mental, more spiritual.
Yeah.
So it's like biohacking them up this gradient. And I know that's like a big general overview, and it sounds like a maybe hard. That's why I said like before it was muscle building, and that's very easy for someone to wrap their head around. But now it's part of some bigger picture of first we attack the physical, and then we move our way up to mental, and then spiritual.
Yeah, that is very much in line with the chakras. And even if you look at the neuroanatomy of your brain, the lowest parts of your brain control the super basic stuff, the sleep-wake cycle, the making sure you're drinking enough water, like even your testosterone, your balls, your sex drive, it's at the lowest level. And then as we go up higher, and perhaps with in line with evolution, the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate, amygdala, those kind of things start to really develop, and that's the last thing to develop, right? In the human brain. Um, are there any unknown peptides that you're leveraging with your family here?
Unknown, like the less common,
Yeah.
less well known peptides. Boy, I'm a lot. I have to think about what's a rare one. Not just peptides, but small molecules and research chemicals, every different medications, different uses of existing medications. So no, I don't know. What's one that comes to mind that sounds exotic, and I'll think if there's a place for it.
Um,
Some
I feel like
exotic
people already know
peptides.
C-Max and C-Lank.
Yep. Yep, we
There's
use those.
KPV.
Well, I guess bromantane, for example. It's not super powerful, but it works in the dopamine pathway. 9 MBC, 9 MEBC
Mhm.
for fixing dopamine problems.
Dihexa, Nupept.
Dihexa and Nupept and CDP choline and NSI 189 and PRL 8 53. These are ones I'm using regularly. Yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Which one was the one that has a potential theoretical risk of Alzheimer's disease? Was that
I
the,
don't know which.
I think that was either dihexa or bromantane, um,
Oh,
based on the I think I saw one of your videos like years ago when you were talking about how it could potentially increase your risk of Alzheimer's. I'll definitely text you if I come up with that.
yeah. Let me know which one it was. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this was fantastic. Can I ask you one personal question, Tony?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the ladyboys in Thailand?
Lady boys. Well, that the reason why I was so interested in that on a deeper level than just the novelty is because it really challenges what we think about masculinity and femininity. And it shows us that with biohacking, you can create an avatar in your head of what you want to be, and you can actually achieve it. So now the freedom to be what you want to be, even if it's something that goes against natural biology, it shows that the technology is there. I mean, because they're taking so it's a man taking estrogen, a man getting boobs, a man doing things to make their hair thicker, their skin softer, they're hijacking their biochemistry. So their ladyboys are a product of advanced biohacking, and it causes a belief system challenge and shift for people. In America, you have a lot of homophobia. Well, there's not just America. A lot of places you have a lot of homophobia. And then when you have a man fall in love with or lust for, like who he thinks is the most beautiful and smartest woman he's ever met, which is usually what happens when a man meets a ladyboy they really like. And then they find out that it's a ladyboy. It's like this complete breakdown of their previous beliefs, and they become this new, more mindful person. They break out of the non-player character cycle. So there's lots of different tools and tricks to shock people out of the matrix and make them into sovereign humans, making their own decisions and challenging their previous programming. And ladyboys are a very powerful tool for that. That's what happened to me, when I first came to Thailand, and I met this lady boy who was one of the most beautiful women I've ever met, one of the smartest women I've ever met, and one of the best personalities women I've ever met, and who actually treated me like exactly how I wanted to be treated. Like basically the best women I've ever met have been lady boys. And then it really challenges, like, wow, how is that possible? And you meditate on this. And through that meditation of challenging your own original beliefs, you grow as a person, as a human. So I know that's getting into further than just like the sexual immediate, gratification and pleasure and novelty of it. But there's a deeper meaning behind ladyboys. I think they can teach us something about biohacking, teach us something about humanity, and it's one of the tools to shock someone out of the matrix.
Tony, I love that you take on such a spiritual approach with everything. It kind of makes me feel like you've done maybe a little too many DMT cycles. I don't know if you ever tried DMT, but
Yeah.
yeah, dude, this was awesome. Just to wrap it up for the audience here, can you just give us a quick one, two sentence summary on who do you serve? Like, what kind of people should be reaching out to you, and where can we get that information? Like, are there Instagram accounts or websites or YouTube channels that we can go and find out more about you?
One of the new YouTube channels is Tony Huge Medical Lawyer, where I'm using a little bit of the more of the legal analysis and techniques to prevent censorship. And then Instagram, Tony Huge. And then I'm everywhere because I have to be everywhere because the censorship is so strong. I have to broadly distribute my content. So understand also there's like a huge amount of sort of like fan pages for me to push content out through. So it's like you got to kind of follow as many Tony Huge things that come up as possible because they're going to constantly get censored. And if you're not subscribed to all of them, then the one you're subscribed to might be eliminated tomorrow, and then you'll lose track of me. And this is the biggest problem I see when fans come up to me in the street. They're like, wow, your video had such a big impact. You changed the way I thought about this. Because of you, I started taking enhancement chemistry, all that. But I don't find you anymore. Where are you? And that's because whatever profile they were finding got censored, got deleted. So
Yeah,
people have to
same
really follow
thing.
everything about Tony Huge.
Yeah, same thing happened to Andrew Tate. And if you can't censor the person, they'll just censor the entire platform, honestly. Um,
Right.
but yeah, so if someone does want to work with you, is the best way to reach you to DM you, Tony Huge, on Instagram?
Yeah, that's easy.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with the viewers here today?
Just remember, a day natural is a day wasted. And like you said, for every biological problem, there's a chemical solution.
Awesome. So I'm gonna have you stay on the call just one second. I'm stopping the recording.